Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the City of Glendale Civil Service Commission May 14, 2008 regular meeting. Could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Coleman?
Here.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yeah, here.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Here.
Chair Gantis?
I am here. What is next, please?
Reading of the minutes.
Okay, we have the minutes from April 23rd. Do we have any comments? Any motions?
Move to approve and dispense from reading.
Second.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Doyle.
I do apologize, but we unwittingly demoted Captain Kirk Palmer to lieutenant in his minutes, so it's beginning on page 2 and 3, we would like to amend his title to be captain in several places. That's all I have.
Okay, with that correction, any other corrections? With that correction, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Yes.
Chair Gantis?
Yes, what is next?
Oral communications.
This is the time for discussion on items that are not a part of the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. I have no cards. Does anybody wish to address the Civil Service Commission in oral communications? Seeing nobody, I declare oral communications closed. What is next?
Recruitment and examination status report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this report is a record of our current recruitment processes. It's once again quite a long list. We do expect somewhat of a slowdown due to some issues with the budget. We are requiring departments to re-justify their recruitments, including those that have already been opened. And so we might see a reduction in this list, although there will be some exceptions. Some of the enterprise accounts, water and power, perhaps public safety, they might be accepted. But other than that, that's where we're at with recruitment. If you have any questions, be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? None appearing. There's no action. What is next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this report deals with the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting, which was 2 to 3 weeks ago. As you can see, there have been 8 lists established, 4 of them open, 3 promotional, and 1 promotional and open. As is typical with this report, we have the total number of applications listed in one column, and then the far right column indicates the total number of candidates who are successful in making it through respective process and make it onto the list. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? No action. What is next?
Job bulletin for approval, Deputy Director of Development Services.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a request for a bulletin approval for the position of Deputy Director of Development Services. It's a position that recently became vacant with a promotion, position formerly held by Dave Ahern. He now works in the Parks Department as a project administrator. The reason this is coming before you is that this position was recruited previously for on a promotional basis. The department is seeking to make this an open recruitment process and go to the outside. Largely because there's been some degree of turnover in the department. Many of the professional staff are brand new. In fact, I think the 2 current project administrators, they're both probationary employees. So this is sort of the number 2 position in the department, and it's again Mr. Lanzafame, who's here, would like to conduct an open recruitment. So with that, if you have any questions, Phil is here, as is Ms. Martin from my staff who worked on the bulletin.
Any questions? Yes, sir. Mr. Commissioner Coleman.
I have a question whether or not this position is even necessary. And I would like to state why before I get your answer. The position is for Deputy Director, who's going to report either to the Assistant Director or the Director. All right? And the report on administrative services shows that development services has a total of 10 salaried employees. And I'm just wondering why we need 3 chiefs.
Let me just interrupt one thing, and we don't have an org chart, so maybe you could enlighten the rest of us. We're talking about a director, then down as the assistant director, and then under that is the deputy director, and then the rest of the staff under that?
That is correct.
Okay.
And the rest of the staff consists of 7 salaried employees.
Okay. Mr. Lanzafame?
Mr. Chairman, the series actually includes a director, an assistant director, and a deputy director. Some time ago, maybe 2 years ago, we restructured the department to take out the assistant director, and we no longer have that position approved. So we haven't had an assistant director since I left the position in December of 2004. The bulletin is drafted that way simply because it is set up, the series is set up director, assistant director, and deputy director. I can't ever foresee having a deputy director and an assistant director because I would agree with you that that's not necessary. But it is necessary to have, quote, a number 2 to take my place when I'm not available and to run the what we call current redevelopment.
So, as it stands, we don't have an assistant?
We do not have an assistant, and in fact, since Mr. Ahern moved to Parks, I've not had any assistant or deputy, and this is a critical position in the day-to-day operation of redevelopment.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Well, let me ask, I mean, that's great, except on the budget now, what's being budgeted is a position, the deputy director, and we're not budgeting the assistant director?
That is correct.
So, I mean, my question would be, well, why aren't we hiring an assistant instead of a deputy? But you feel that you could get the job done with the deputy at a lesser pay than an assistant. I assume the assistant's more pay. But it's not budgeted either anyway. But
yes, the assistant director would actually oversee in the way that the job spec is set up. They would oversee both redevelopment and economic development, citywide economic development. A few years back, in consultation with the city manager, we thought that it would be a better structure to have, if you would, division managers, one to oversee redevelopment and one to oversee economic development. And we have since hired an economic development manager. He is currently on probation as well because of he was recently hired, less than 12 months. And so we see this as the number 2 position that would oversee that division. And we found that made for a more efficient structure as opposed to having a director, an assistant director, and then several senior project managers.
Coleman.
How many total employees does the department have?
The department has 14. Okay. We fund several other positions, and I've got a legal general counsel for GRA in the city attorney's office as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Ron Braden.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I might add that it's the City Council who determines what positions are needed in the city, and jurisdiction of the Commission is to determine whether the job bulletin has appropriate educational experience, knowledge, practical requirements to meet the job.
I figured that was the reality, but when I took a look at the evaluation stats and saw that there were 10 salary employees, and the job specs or the announcement prior to it didn't indicate that the assistant director position has been vacant for 5 years, 4 years. So I quite frankly wanted to know how many people were working in the department, how many hourly employees, and that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, of course you can ask, what you desire, but I just wanted to make that clarification in case it was necessary.
Pretty well aware of it.
Okay.
Any other questions? What is your desire, Mr. Devine?
I just had one quick question, Mr. Lanzafame. What impact would this action have on your department if we took it 2 weeks from today instead of today, just academically speaking?
I'm not sure how that would help, but I I would plead with the commission that I would...
No, we're going to take it today, but I'm just asking academically, if this had come up 2 weeks from now, would there have been a critical impact on your operation in terms of getting the job done or whatnot?
No, it would not.
Thank you.
Anything further? Yes, Mr.
Just a
Minuchin.
quick comment. This is for, replacing Dave's position?
Yes.
Okay. This is just a comment. I've had the opportunity of working with Dave on a number of projects, and I don't know how you're going to find somebody to take his position, honestly, because this individual helped me on so many different projects, and the asset that he would provide to your department is unbelievable. It's going to be very tough because, especially when negotiating with tenants and when you're trying to bring in new developers into the city, all you have to do is pick up the phone, call Dave, and he would be there in an instant representing the city, and the information that he would provide would help you close the deal. So good luck finding somebody.
Appreciate the comments. I tend to agree. I do know that Dave continues to be a strong supporter of all of the things we're doing in development services, and he has passed some of that wisdom on to some of the younger project managers, and our intent is that we find somebody that can continue that enthusiasm.
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Minuchin?
Yes.
Commissioner Perrion?
Yes.
Chair Gantis?
Yes. Just before you leave, Mr. Lands of Fame, I want to also congratulate you and your staff on, I know, a yeoman's work in getting the Americana up and going, and I think it's pretty successful by all accounts. We have a lot of bodies walking through there.
Thank you very much. There really was, when you say me and my staff, there was a lot of people that worked on this in virtually every department, including human resources, when they helped us hire the people that have worked on the project. It really was touched by almost every department. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. What is next?
Report on civil service meeting cancellation process.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission asked, particularly Commissioner Devine, asked whether we could cancel meetings on an as-needed basis, and if so, what would be the process for doing that. You have in front of you my very brief report that basically answers in the affirmative that you can cancel them, and that the process for doing that would be to pass a resolution allowing the Commission to cancel meetings by a majority vote of the quorum present. So with that, for your consideration is the resolution. Whatever action you have is appropriate for you to take at this time, or if you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
Mr. Devine.
Yes. First of all, thank you for the report. I think it's very informative. However, when I brought this up originally, it was a result of 2 meetings that we had, and today is a prime example of a third one that I'll use as an example in a minute. But my main thrust was for staff, with the concurrence of the chairman of the commission, on a short notice to be able to cancel a meeting when there is nothing on the agenda that can't wait till the following week. We had 2 cases like today where there were no rush or urgent items on the agenda. It was a short agenda, and on both those meetings we were adjourned within 15 or 20 minutes of meeting. And tonight's going to be the same thing. That's the reason I asked Mr. Lanzafame whether his one action item tonight would have been had a bad impact if we did it 2 weeks from tonight, and the answer was no.
We've had a 7-minute meetings.
Well,
just to let you know.
Okay,
that was when you were chairman, as I recall, Mr. Abkarian, to give you your due.
and I agree. And I'm looking. My reason for bringing it up is I see 13 staff people sitting here plus 5 commissioners coming in, spending time, and I feel that it could be more productively spent when there's only going to be a 15 or 20-minute meeting. And all I'm suggesting is that we take this resolution, which really puts the onus on this commission to pass a resolution, and then take a vote before we cancel a meeting. That would really not serve the purpose or the intent. Whereas Mr. Doyle, when he sees that there's, like on this agenda tonight, where he sees it's going to be a short meeting, he checks with the staff to see whether there's any urgent items, and then he has the prerogative to get in touch with the chairman of the commission, suggest that it's a short meeting, there's nothing urgent, and suggest that we cancel it and carry it on for the following meeting. And again, the intent is to save the staff the time and the city the money in having a meeting that is really not necessary.
In response to that, unfortunately, the only way the commission can take action is by a vote of the majority of the commission present at a quorum. I think the way to handle that would be through your agenda forecast, is to try to look down the road and by asking Mr. Doyle whether what items can be delayed for a couple of weeks or whatever it may be, and I think that would be the way to handle it. But action of the commission has to be by the commission.
Mr. Braden, we could adopt a procedure, that similar procedure. Clearly, it would have to be done before the Brown Act notice was put up, but arguably last Wednesday, if we had that procedure. Mr. Doyle could call myself as the chairman and say, we only have one item. Maybe we should think of not having the meeting, which means it doesn't get noticed. And I mean, we could delegate that by motion, can't we? A resolution.
Well, no, because what your rules say is that all action by the commission is done by a majority of the quorum present.
It's not an action. It's just not. It's a non-meeting. We're not taking an action. It's a non-meeting.
I think to cancel a meeting when your resolution determines that they're held the second and fourth Wednesday of every month is an action item.
There's
Mr. Abkarin.
I recall that this issue came up 4 years ago, and there was actually a detailed report on it, believe it or not. And one of the things that I recall was that the reason that we couldn't just cancel the meeting 2 weeks in advance or something was because there was some issue in reference to the appeal process, and when somebody appeals a case, it needs to come in front of us immediately within a particular time, and if we don't have that meeting by the time we have the second meeting, that time might have actually passed, and that's the reason that we have the meetings actually once every 2 weeks. I recall a discussion of an appeal process for the employee, that the employee actually had the right to, let's say, appeal a day after our tomorrow. And then if we cancel the next meeting, then we won't have a meeting for 30 days, and there were some issues about the rights of that appellant to be heard and all the other stuff that went with it, and that's why we had the meeting once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, but you're correct. I remember that now that you've refreshed my recollection. But we would have already had that on the agenda, and then therefore it wouldn't be canceled. I think what Mr. Devine is indicating is where we know if we know on Wednesday what's going to go on. Somebody that appeals something on Thursday is not going to be agendized because that's when the notice is going to be put. They're not necessarily going to be agendized for the next meeting. So that's it could be done a week before. You're correct that we can't decide, way in advance, but I certainly think, of course, given what Mr. Braden has said, I guess one of the questions I would have is if, in fact, the charter says that we have to meet on certain days, and I don't think we can do it. But if it's a resolution, I think we can resolution it. Commissioner Coleman.
I've researched the charter and the Civil Service Rules and Regulations, and there's nothing in the charter or the Civil Service Rules and Regulations saying that, one, we have to have meetings on the second and fourth week of every month. And not to be argumentative, but we just went 3 weeks without having a meeting because of the way the calendar is set up. We are now in the second Wednesday of the month, and our last meeting was 3 weeks ago. So I'm inclined to agree with Commissioner Devine on this. There's I'm looking right at the rules and regulations. It's on page 49. There's nothing in the rules and regulations that state we have to have meetings on the second and fourth week of the month. And there's nothing in the charter that says we do either.
What the rules and regulations require is that the commission establish its regular meeting dates via resolution,
So,
and that you've done.
so we could cancel them via resolution then. Why can't we, if we establish them, why can't we cancel them?
Well, that's why I proposed a resolution in there that upon a meeting you cancel it. I think the way to handle that is to, with the assistance of Mr. Doyle, to telescope what's coming up on the agenda.
Mr. Abkarian?
I have a suggestion. How would it be that before Wednesday, if we all get a fax and basically, I guess that would be a Brown Act violation if we all sign all that and send it in. This shouldn't be a big deal, really.
Yeah, I know we're making a mountain out of a molehill.
We come here for 10 minutes and we go home. It's just gas.
Well,
guys,
it's also
relax.
13 people sitting out there. Maybe it's not a big deal for us, but for them, they have other things they can do. And I'm thinking of the whole big picture, not just the 5 of us.
And the preparation of the agenda, but then the agenda would have been prepared by then, wouldn't it, Matt? Pretty much all the reports and everything.
Perhaps Mr. Doyle can enlighten us on a
Well,
procedure that
if
will...
I could just interject, in Section 2A, it does say regular meetings, and this is the rules and regulations. The commission shall provide by resolution the time and place for holding regular meetings.
Okay. Which we've done. Mr. Doyle?
I'd certainly be open to any process that would enable staff to consult with the chair and cancel a meeting if the agenda looks light. Mr. Braden's resolution to this of dealing with it through the agenda forecast isn't always going to work, because sometimes it's not until the week before the actual meeting to where we know that there's not going to be any items or if it's going to be a heavy agenda. So if there would be a way to either rewrite this resolution, which would enable me to make a recommendation of a cancellation of a meeting to the chair with everyone's concurrence, I certainly feel comfortable with that.
I just have one question for Mr. Braden. In your research, where did you come across the idea that we had to have the majority of the quorum vote on canceling a meeting?
Well, because it's an act by it's some kind of an act that's performed, and the only way the commission can act is through a majority vote of the quorum.
So are you saying that we would have to meet
to cancel?
To cancel, essentially? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it could be an agenda item. If now once again, Mr. Doyle is saying there's some problems with forecasting everything on a timely basis, but nonetheless, it could be if in telescoping what's coming up in the future and things can be put on, he could put on the agenda to cancel a particular meeting.
But the other side, taking the Albert Abkarian argument to the reverse, arguably something could come up that Thursday that needs an appeal, and we would have voted on the Wednesday, but for 2 weeks from now and cancel it, and then you just can't act that way. I tend to agree with Commissioner Coleman. I think that we can, by action, I don't see why we can't delegate that particular thing, whether to hold the meeting or not. Can't be done after the Brown Act is up. Notice, I think then it has to be a meeting that cancels it. But if we choose not to Brown Act the meeting, notice, and we have a process to do that, I don't see how that violates the Brown Act. I don't see how it violates any action that we take. Mr. Chairman,
my recommendation would be that we ask Mr. Braden, I think that maybe the focus was a little bit different, maybe to look at this issue based on what we just recommended and come back in 2 weeks and give us a concrete opinion. I mean, at the end of the day, if the city attorney tells us we can't do it, I'm not going to go against what the city attorney says, because I'm not going to look at the consequences. So I'm asking the city attorney. My recommendation would be that we ask the city attorney, now that he's gotten direction of exactly what we want to do. I think what we didn't give it, maybe we didn't give or we didn't communicate it properly. Now that he has enough direction as to where he needs to go, to come back in 2 weeks and tell us yes or no, is he going to basically recommend that we do it this way, or could we actually have a resolution passed where we give the chairman and the director of the human resources the right to cancel meetings if there are nothing on the agenda? if that's okay with everyone else in the...
Works.
That's fine.
Mr. Manukian?
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to suggest. I mean, who are we to argue with our legal counsel? So, and I think everyone, he knows what direction everybody wants to go, and I love Albert Afghani's suggestion.
I agree with it.
Okay,
You have sufficient direction, Mr. Braden?
I do.
Mr. Brady, we basically, let me just, can I make
Go
clear?
ahead, please do.
If I understand Mr. Devine, and maybe we want to know if on a Wednesday morning before the Brown Act rules, or Thursday morning,
Before
or whatever,
Brown
before
Act
the
notices.
Act through 72 hours, if we can have the Human Resources Director contact the chairperson and say, we would like to cancel the meeting, and the chairperson says, what do you have? And they say A, B, and C, and they say, that's a good idea, let's postpone this to the next meeting, and they can then unilaterally or just talking to each other decide that, yes, we want to cancel it, and then notify everyone that the meeting is canceled on Thursday.
And let me respond to that. I mean, the Brown Act would not be an impediment to canceling the meeting, because all the Brown Act requires is a
Notice of
post
it.
notice of matters that are going to be discussed at the meeting, and then nothing can be discussed. So that would not be an impediment.
Okay, whatever, is the direction clear, though? Do you understand where we're going? Okay, perfect.
Again, I'd like it to be in a positive sense, to find out a way we can do that rather than come back and tell us why we can't do it. In other words, figure out a way of doing it.
Let's do it.
We'll do our best, Mr. Devine.
Thank you.
Give us both sides. If you're going to be negative, then give us what we can do positively, and if we choose to take that road, we can take that road.
We'll get a legal opinion.
We'll get a legal
Thank you,
opinion.
Mr. Brady.
Thank you.
Just do it.
Thank you.
Do it. What is next?
Agenda forecast.
So, I'm sorry, let me make sure this is correct. Okay, on that report, let's get the agenda forecast, and then we'll talk about when we're going to bring it back, because we have a hearing in 2 weeks. Go ahead, Mr. Doyle, please.
Agenda forecast is before you. The next couple of meetings, some of the significant items. And let me add, in discussing forecasting, it's very hard to do even 2 weeks in advance, because the staff is working very hard. There's job descriptions, there's positions we have to open, and a lot of that is contingent upon your approval. So, and again, even looking at the agenda forecast, we may have one item for the next meeting and one item for the next, but it's really hard to say what other items will be piled on later on. But essentially what we have, the only thing listed for the next meeting would be the reorganization of the commission, where you appoint a chair and vice chair. The meeting after that, with June 11th, we'll be discussing selection of outside hearing officers for disciplinary appeals, if we ever need to choose that alternative. And then really nothing set at this point. The June 25th, there's a hearing that day, so it'll probably be a short meeting. With that, we're happy to answer any questions.
I would think, Mr. Abkarian and the rest of us, that we could deal with this issue of the cancellation process. I don't think it's going to be we've already kind of vetted out the issues, that we can do that at the next meeting, even with the hearing that's scheduled, because we hopefully will not have too much more on there. Any questions on the agenda forecast? What is next?
Reports and information, past due employee performance evaluations.
Commissioner Coleman?
Okay. We have the city clerk's office with no past dues. City treasurer's office, no past dues. Development services with 10 employees, no past dues. Glendale Water and Power, 379 salaried employees, no past dues. Human Resources, no past dues. Way to go, Matt. Information Services, no past dues. Planning, no past dues. Police, with 378 salaried employees, no past dues. And Public Works with 316, no past dues. I do just want to make one real quick well, I guess I can hold off on the next agenda item comments.
Okay, well, we seem to be getting a little better, but we're still, a few of the departments are getting a little sloppy, so...
Well, what I was going to say was that, particularly with the fire department and finance, finance has 2 first notices, the fire department has 1. but they've just undergone, incredible changes in both departments, a new chief, a new director, and I think that's kind of an aberration, particularly for the fire department. They've been doing a great job.
Okay, anything further on that? What is next?
Civil Service Commission interstaff comments.
Commissioner Coleman.
I would just personally like to congratulate Harold Stoggins on becoming our new fire chief. The city went through a nationwide search, and he was standing right before us the entire time. And I just wanted to congratulate our new chief.
Commissioner Abkarian.
I have to echo the same thing.
Hold on.
I want to echo the same thing. I think he's a great. He was the right choice, and I'm glad that the city made the right choice. One. Two is I wanted to tell everyone that Glendale Healthy Kids is going to have Taste of Glendale tonight.
Right.
Please go out there. If you don't have a ticket, I'm sure you can pick one up maybe even tonight. But if you see people with the wristband, Glendale Healthy Kids is a great organization, does a great job, and tonight they have a Taste of Glendale. And last but not least, Commissioner Art, when we decide to all dress the same, please don't go out of way to wear blue when we all match in here. So next time, I don't want to see that. Please call us and we'll work this out.
I didn't get the email on the dress code, and I do apologize to my colleagues.
Don't go outside of our dress code here, please.
I will be in uniform next time.
Sure, my goodness. You didn't think of that. Matt's out of order too, but that's okay. You guys got the memo. Any other, I'd like to echo also Harold Scoggins. We have a fine fire chief. We are very, very fortunate. I don't know Mr. Elliott, however, I know people that do know him, who's the new finance director. He also was under our nose. I understand he lives here, worked in Burbank, and they tell me he's a pretty excellent guy. So we don't know him. Hopefully they'll both come here to introduce themselves at some future date. It would certainly be nice to, well, we know Harold, but certainly Mr. Elliott. But in any event, Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce a new member of our staff. Like Alex, if you would come on up. Alex Soto is our new Human Resources Associate. This was somewhat of an extensive search. It wasn't nationwide, but we did have quite a few candidates, over 100, I believe, and Alex rose to the top. He's got a very, very good background in project management. He worked for the city of LA for a while, and degree from Cal State LA. He lives in the area, went to St. Francis High School, and currently lives in Toluca Lake, and we're very pleased to have him here. So,
congratulations, Alex. Does he get one of the new offices?
He does.
Oh?
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
Okay. We'll make sure that we'll work you as hard as we work all the other staff members.
Or harder.
Sure. Or even harder.
You have to take a class in public speaking. Ms. Unani will tell you. Will teach you how to come up and speak in front of the commission. What is next? Any other commission and/or staff comments?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. You got ahead of me?